The rain battered the windows of their small suburban home in Portland, Oregon, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. Mark Sullivan, 42, sat frozen on the edge of his couch, his heart pounding so hard he swore it could wake the neighbors. Tonight, he would tell his son, Ethan, the truth he'd buried for decades, a truth that could unravel everything. Mark's calloused hands trembled as he gripped a mug of cold coffee, the steam long gone. For years, he'd worn the mask of a devoted father, a dependable mechanic, a man who fit neatly into the expectations of his small-town life. But beneath it all, he was someone else, someone he'd hidden since he was younger than Ethan. Now 16, sitting across from him, scrolling through his phone with earbuds dangling. Ethan, Mark said, his voice cracking like thin ice. The boy looked up, his brown eyes curious but guarded. Mark's throat tightened. This was it. No more lies. I need to talk to you. It's important. Ethan pulled out an earbud, his brow furrowing. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as if the walls were leaning in to listen. Mark had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. But now, with his son's gaze on him, the words felt like stones in his mouth. He'd raised Ethan alone since his wife, Laura, died 6 years ago. They'd been a team, a duo against the world. But this secret, his truth, could break that bond. I've been keeping something from you, Mark started, his voice low. Not because I wanted to, but because I was scared. Scared of what you'd think. Scared of losing you. Ethan's phone slipped to his lap, his full attention now on his father. Mark's chest ached. I'm gay, Ethan. I've known it since I was a kid, but I've never had the courage to say it out loud. Not until now. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's face was unreadable, his eyes wide but distant, like he was processing a language he didn't speak. Mark's pulse raced. He'd imagined this moment so many times, Ethan storming out, Ethan crying, Ethan hating him. But the reality was worse. The boy just stared, and every second of that stare carved a deeper wound in Mark's heart. Why now? Ethan finally asked, his voice soft but sharp, like a blade wrapped in velvet. The question caught Mark off guard. He'd expected anger, confusion, anything but this calm, piercing curiosity. Mark swallowed hard. Because I'm tired, Ethan. Tired of pretending. Tired of feeling like I'm betraying you by not being honest. I want you to know who I am, all of me. His voice wavered, but he pressed on. I love you more than anything. And if this changes how you see me, I'll understand. But I can't keep hiding. Ethan leaned back in his chair, his fingers tracing the armrest. Mark braced himself, every muscle tensed for the blow he feared was coming. But then Ethan spoke, and his words were a spark in the dark. Dad, I already knew. Mark blinked, his breath catching. What? I've known for a while, Ethan said, his voice steady but laced with something raw, something Mark couldn't quite name. I saw the way you looked at Mr. Carter, the guy who owns the bookstore. The way you'd smile when he talked to you at the farmer's market. It wasn't hard to figure out. Mark's mind reeled. Mr. Carter, James Carter, the quiet, kind man with a laugh like summer and eyes that seemed to see right through Mark's carefully built walls. Mark had never said a word about his feelings, never acted on them. But Ethan had seen. His son had seen him. You're not mad? Mark asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Mad. No. Confused. Maybe. I mean, you're my dad. You're supposed to be, I don't know, boring. Not hiding some big secret like this. He paused, his eyes softening. But I'm not mad. I wish you'd told me sooner. The weight in Mark's chest didn't vanish, but it shifted, like a boulder rolling just enough to let him breathe. He wanted to ask more, to understand how Ethan could be so calm. But the boy wasn't done. There's something I need to tell you, too, Ethan said, his voice dropping. He looked down at his hands, then back at Mark, and there was a fire in his eyes Mark hadn't seen before. I'm not like other kids, either. I'm bi. I've known for a couple of years, but I didn't know how to tell you. The room spun. Mark's heart, already raw, felt like it had been cracked open and filled with something new, something warm and terrifying and beautiful. His son, his boy, was trusting him with his own truth. And in that moment, Mark realized this wasn't just about him coming out. It was about them, together, stepping into a new kind of honesty. Ethan, Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm so proud of you. He reached out, hesitating, then placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Ethan didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into it, just a little, and Mark felt tears prick his eyes. But the moment was fleeting. Ethan's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his face darkening. It's Jake, he said, his voice tight. Jake, Ethan's best friend, the one who'd been pulling away lately, the one who'd started hanging with a crowd that made Mark's skin crawl. He's been weird ever since I told him I liked a guy at school. Mark's stomach twisted. He knew that tone in Ethan's voice: fear, anger, the kind of hurt that came from betrayal. This wasn't just their moment anymore. Something bigger was brewing, something that could test them both. As the rain pounded harder outside, Mark realized this was only the beginning. Their truths had brought them closer, but the world outside their door wasn't always kind. And Ethan's next words confirmed it. Dad, I think I'm in trouble. Mark's heart lurched at Ethan's words. The warmth of their shared confessions evaporated, replaced by a cold dread that settled in his bones. What kind of trouble? He asked, leaning forward, every instinct screaming to protect his son. Ethan's eyes darted to his phone, then back to Mark. It's Jake. And his new friends. They know about me. About me being bi. His voice cracked, and he rubbed his palms on his jeans, a nervous habit he'd had since he was a kid. I told Jake a few months ago, back when we were still tight. I thought he'd be cool with it. He said he was. But now, Mark's jaw tightened. Jake had been Ethan's shadow since middle school, the kind of friend who'd crash on their couch after late-night video game marathons. But lately, Jake had changed, hanging with a group of older kids, the kind who wore their smirks like armor and tossed around slurs like they were nothing. Mark had seen them at the gas station, their laughter sharp and cruel, and it had set him on edge. What did he do? Mark asked, keeping his voice steady, though his hands were fists now. Ethan hesitated, then unlocked his phone and slid it across the coffee table. Mark picked it up, his eyes scanning the screen. It was a group chat, a string of messages from Jake and his new crew. The words hit like punches: freak, fag, you think you're special. There was a photo, a blurry shot of Ethan at school, laughing with a boy Mark didn't recognize, with a caption that made his blood boil: Ethan's got a boyfriend. Gross. Mark's vision blurred with rage, but he forced himself to stay calm for Ethan's sake. Who's this boy in the picture? He asked, his voice low. Ethan's cheeks flushed. That's Liam. He's someone I like. We're not, like, together or anything, but we've been talking. Jake saw us at lunch last week, and I guess he told his friends. Ethan's voice trembled. They've been texting me nonstop, saying they're gonna fix me. I don't even know what that means, but it scares me. Mark's heart broke, but anger surged hotter. He set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. You're not in this alone, Ethan. We'll figure this out. Together. He reached out, and this time, Ethan didn't just let him rest. A hand on his shoulder grabbed Mark's hand, squeezing hard. I didn't want to drag you into this, Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I didn't know who else to tell. You did the right thing, Mark said firmly. You're my kid. Your fights are my fights. But even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. He'd spent his life avoiding conflict, hiding his truth to keep the peace. Could he really protect Ethan from this? The next morning, Mark drove Ethan to school, his eyes scanning the parking lot for Jake or his crew. Ethan was quiet, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his earbuds in but not playing anything. Mark wanted to say something, anything, to ease the tension, but words felt inadequate. As Ethan climbed out of the truck, Mark called after him. You call me if anything happens. Okay. Anything. Ethan nodded, but his eyes were distant, already bracing for the day. Mark watched him disappear into the crowd, his chest tight with worry. He couldn't shake the image of those texts, the venom in them. He needed answers, and he knew where to start. James Carter's bookstore was a haven in downtown Portland, a cozy shop with creaky floors and shelves stuffed with everything from poetry to sci-fi. Mark had always found excuses to stop by buying a book he'd never read, lingering over coffee at the shop's tiny cafe. James, with his easy smile and quiet confidence, had been a flicker of light in Mark's carefully guarded world. Now, Mark needed his perspective. Mark, good to see you, James said as Mark stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling. James was in his late 30s, with dark hair and a face that seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. He was restocking a display, but he paused, sensing Mark's tension. Everything okay? Mark hesitated, then spilled at all the conversation with Ethan, the texts, the fear in his son's eyes. James listened, his expression shifting from concern to quiet anger. Kids can be cruel, he said when Mark finished. But this sounds like more than just kids being kids. You need to talk to the school, Mark. And you need to be there for Ethan, more than ever. I know, Mark said, running a hand through his hair. But I don't even know where to start. I've spent my whole life hiding who I am. How do I help him when I'm still figuring this out myself? James leaned against the counter, his eyes steady. You start by showing up. You're his dad. That's enough for now. The rest, you'll learn together. He paused, then added, and if you need someone to lean on, I'm here. Mark's heart skipped, but he pushed the feeling down. This wasn't about him. Not now. Thanks, James, he said, his voice rough. I might take you up on that. As he left the bookstore, Mark's phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. Jake's waiting for me after school. I'm scared. Mark's grip tightened on the phone. He wasn't just a dad anymore, was a shield. And he'd be damned if anyone hurt his son. Mark's truck roared into the school parking lot 10 minutes before the final bell. His hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as he scanned the crowd of students spilling out the doors. Ethan's text had been a gut punch, and every second waiting felt like an eternity. He spotted his son near the bike racks, head down, moving fast. But Jake was there, too, leaning against a fence with two older boys, their postures screaming trouble. Mark was out of the truck before he could think, his boots crunching on the gravel. Ethan, he called, his voice cutting through the chatter. Ethan's head snapped up, relief flooding his face as he hurried toward his dad. Jake's smirk faltered, but he didn't move, his friends flanking him like bodyguards. "Dad, let's just go," Ethan muttered, grabbing Mark's arm. But Mark's eyes were locked on Jake, a lanky 17-year-old with a cocky grin that made Mark's blood simmer. "Hold on," Mark said, his voice low but firm. He stepped toward Jake, who straightened, his friends exchanging glances. "You got a problem with my son?" Mark asked, his tone calm but laced with steel. Jake shrugged, his smirk returning. "No problem, Mr. Sullivan. Just having some fun." Ethan's sensitive. You know. The way he said sensitive dripped with mockery, and his friend snickered. Mark took a step closer, his 6-foot frame towering over Jake. "Fun stops when it hurts someone. You sent those texts. You took that picture. You think that's a game?" His voice was steady, but his heart pounded. He'd never been a fighter, but for Ethan, he'd tear the world apart. Jake's bravado wavered, but he held his ground. "Whatever, man. Ethan's the one making it a big deal." Ethan's voice cut in, small but fierce. "You're the one who told everyone. Jake. You were my friend." The hurt in his words hit Mark harder than anything Jake could have said. Jake's face twitched, a flicker of guilt breaking through his mask. But before he could respond, one of his friends stepped forward, a burly kid with a shaved head. "Back off, old man," he said, his voice low and threatening. Mark didn't flinch. "You don't scare me, kid. And you don't get to scare my son." He turned to Ethan, softening his tone. "Let's go." As they walked to the truck, Mark felt Jake's eyes burning into his back. Ethan was quiet, his shoulders hunched. In the truck, Mark waited until they were a few blocks away before speaking. "You okay?" Ethan nodded, but his eyes were wet. I thought he was my friend. You know. I trusted him." Mark's throat tightened. He knew that betrayal, that ache of losing someone you thought saw you. "I'm sorry, Ethan. You didn't deserve that." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But you stood up for yourself back there. That took guts." Ethan gave a small, shaky smile. "You were kind of badass, Dad." Mark chuckled, but the weight of the moment lingered. Back home, they sat in the kitchen, the silence between them more comfortable now. Ethan opened up about Liam, the boy from the photo, a shy kid who loved art and had a laugh that made Ethan's heart race. Mark listened, his chest swelling with pride and a pang of fear. Ethan was brave, braver than Mark had been at his age, but the world wasn't always kind to brave kids. That evening, Mark called the school, demanding a meeting with the principal. He wasn't just fighting for Ethan now, was fighting for every kid who felt unsafe. The principal, Ms. Harper, was sympathetic but cautious, promising to investigate but warning that bullying cases were complicated. Mark hung up, frustrated but determined. He'd follow up, push harder, make sure Ethan wasn't just another case file. Later, as Ethan did homework at the dining table, Mark slipped out to the porch, needing air. His phone buzzed a text from James. "Heard what happened. You did good, Mark. Coffee tomorrow." Mark's heart skipped again, but this time, he let himself feel it. Maybe, just maybe, there was room for something new in his life. But the next day brought trouble. Ethan came home with a bruise on his cheek, his eyes downcast. "It was one of Jake's friends," he said, his voice hollow. "They cornered me in the locker room. Said I'd better watch my back." Mark's vision went red. This wasn't just bullying Anna Marie, it was assault. He pulled Ethan into a hug, feeling his son's trembling frame. No one's touching you again, he vowed. I'll make sure of it. Mark barely slept that night, his mind racing with images of Ethan's bruised face. By morning, he was a man on a mission. He drove to the school, Ethan in the passenger seat, silent but clutching his backpack like a lifeline. Mark had called MS. Harper again, demanding an immediate meeting. This wasn't just about words anymore. Someone had laid hands on his son. In the principal's office, MS. Harper sat behind her desk, her face a mask of professional concern. Across from her was the school counselor, Mr. Nguyen, a quiet man with a notepad. Mark didn't sit. He stood, arms crossed, his voice steady but burning. My son was attacked yesterday. In your school. What are you going to do about it? MS. Harper glanced at Ethan, who stared at the floor. We take this very seriously. Mr. Sullivan. Can Ethan tell us what happened? Ethan's voice was small but clear. He recounted the locker room incident, how Jake's friend, Tyler, had shoved him against a wall, how the others had laughed, how the word faggot had echoed in the tiled room. Mark's fists clenched, but he let Ethan speak, proud of his courage despite the pain. Mr. Nguyen took notes, his face grim. We'll investigate. MS. Harper said. Tyler will be suspended pending a full review. But we need to be careful about escalating tensions. Escalating. Mark snapped. My son's got a bruise on his face. This isn't a playground spat, it's assault. And it's because he's bi. You think that's okay? No. Mr. Sullivan. MS. Harper said quickly. We have a zero-tolerance policy for bullying and violence. But we also need to ensure all students feel safe, including those involved. Mark's jaw tightened. All students. You mean the ones who attacked my kid? They don't get a pass because they're uncomfortable with who he is. Ethan touched Mark's arm, his voice soft. Dad, it's okay. I just want this to stop. Mark's anger faltered, replaced by a surge of protectiveness. He nodded, sitting beside Ethan. What's the plan, then? Because I'm not letting this slide. MS. Harper outlined steps, interviews with Tyler and his friends, a school-wide assembly on inclusivity, and counseling for Ethan if he wanted it. Mark wasn't satisfied, but it was a start. He'd be watching. After the meeting, Mark took Ethan to the bookstore, needing a break from the chaos. James greeted them with a warm smile, offering Ethan a hot chocolate. Rough day? He asked, his eyes flicking to the bruise on Ethan's cheek. You could say that, Mark muttered. Ethan wandered to a shelf of graphic novels, giving Mark a moment to talk. He told James about the meeting, the frustration, the fear that this wasn't over. James listened, then leaned closer. You're doing everything you can, Mark. Ethan's lucky to have you. His hand brushed Mark's, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through him. For a moment, Mark let himself imagine a world where he could reach back, but Ethan's return snapped him out of it. That night, Ethan opened up more about Liam. They'd been texting, and Liam had offered to meet up, maybe grab coffee. He's cool, Dad, Ethan said, a shy smile breaking through. He gets me. Mark's heart swelled, but worry lingered. Just be careful, okay? Not everyone's going to be okay with you too. Ethan nodded, but his eyes were bright with something new hope. Mark clung to that, even as his own fears churned. He couldn't shake the feeling that Jake and his crew weren't done. The next day, Mark got a call from MS. Harper. Tyler had been suspended, but Jake and another boy, Chris, were denying involvement. Worse, rumors were spreading, kids whispering about Ethan, about Mark, about their weird family. Mark's stomach churned. This was his fault, wasn't it? By coming out, he'd painted a target on Ethan's back. He went to the bookstore again, needing James's steady presence. Am I making this worse for him? Mark asked, his voice raw. Maybe if I'd stayed quiet. James shook his head. You being honest gave Ethan the courage to be honest. That's not nothing, Mark. You're showing him he's not alone. Mark wanted to believe him, but doubt clung like damp rot. As he drove home, his phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. Your kid's not safe. Back off. His blood ran cold. This wasn't just kids anymore. This was a threat. Mark stared at the text, his pulse hammering in his ears. The words "your kid's not safe" burned into his mind, each letter a shard of glass. He pulled over on a quiet street, his truck idling as he reread the message, hoping he'd misread it. He hadn't. He called Ethan immediately. Where are you? He asked, his voice tight. At home, Dad, Ethan said, sounding confused. I just got back from school. What's wrong? Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me. I'm on my way. Mark hung up, his hands shaking as he shifted into drive. The threat could be a prank, a cruel jab from one of Jake's friends, but he wasn't taking chances. Not with Ethan. When he got home, Ethan was in the living room, his face pale. Mark showed him the text, watching his son's eyes widen. Who sent this? Ethan asked, his voice small. I don't know, Mark admitted. But I'm calling the police. He dialed non-emergency, explaining the situation to an officer who promised to look into it, but warned that anonymous texts were hard to trace. Mark's frustration boiled, but he thanked the officer and hung up. Dad, what if it's Jake? Ethan said, his voice trembling. Or Tyler. They hate me now. Mark knelt in front of him, gripping his shoulders. They don't get to win. Ethan. We're stronger than this. You hear me? Ethan nodded, but his eyes were glassy with fear. Mark spent the evening on edge, checking the locks, peering out the windows. He texted James, needing an anchor. Got a threatening text. About Ethan. I'm freaking out. James replied instantly, come to the bookstore tomorrow. Bring Ethan. We'll figure this out. The next morning, Mark and Ethan sat in the bookstore's cafe, the smell of coffee grounding them. James joined them, his calm presence a balm. I know someone, he said. A friend who's a private investigator. She can look into the text, off the record, if you're okay with it. Mark hesitated, then nodded. Do it. He couldn't sit idly by while someone threatened his son. James made a call, and within hours, a woman named Carla arrived, a no-nonsense investigator with sharp eyes and a notepad. She took the phone, promising to dig into the number's origin. While Carla worked, James distracted Ethan with a stack of comic books. Mark watched them, grateful for James's kindness, but wrestling with guilt. This is my fault, he said quietly when Ethan stepped away. I came out, and now Ethan's a target. James's eyes softened. Mark, you didn't cause this. Hate did. And you're fighting it. For Ethan and for yourself. That's what matters. Mark wanted to argue, but James's words hit deep. He glanced at Ethan, laughing at something James had said, and felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they could get through this. Carla returned that afternoon with news. The text came from a burner phone. Untraceable for now, but she'd keep digging. She also suggested Mark install security cameras and talk to Ethan's teachers again. Mark agreed, his resolve hardening. That evening, Ethan asked to meet Liam. I need something normal, Dad, he said. Mark understood. He drove Ethan to a diner, watching from the truck as his son sat across from a lanky boy with a sketchbook and a shy smile. Ethan's face lit up, and for a moment, Mark saw his son not the scared kid, but the brave, hopeful one. But when they got home, another text arrived. You can't protect him forever. Mark's blood ran cold. He called Carla, his voice shaking with rage. Find them. Now. Mark installed cameras around the house the next day, their red lights blinking like sentinels in the dark. He barely slept, his phone always within reach, waiting for Carla's updates or another threat. Ethan tried to act normal, but Mark saw the tension in his shoulders, the way he jumped at every noise. This wasn't the life Mark wanted for his son. Carla called with a lead. The burner phone had been purchased at a gas station near the school, and security footage showed a hooded figure, possibly a teenager. It's not much, she admitted, but it's a start. I'm cross-referencing with known associates of Jake and Tyler. Mark thanked her, but frustration gnawed at him. He needed answers, not leads. He took Ethan to school, meeting with MS. Harper again to demand more action. She assured him Tyler was still suspended, and Jake was under scrutiny, but Mark sensed her hesitation. The school didn't want a scandal. That afternoon, Mark found Ethan in his room, staring at a sketch Liam had given him, a pencil drawing of two hands intertwined. Simple but intimate. He's really good. Huh? Ethan said, his voice soft. Yeah, Mark said, sitting beside him. He seems like a good kid, too. He paused, then added, You know you can tell me anything, right? About Liam, about school, about all of this. Ethan nodded, but his eyes were distant. I just want to be normal, Dad. I don't want to be the kid everyone whispers about. Mark's heart ached. You are normal, Ethan. You're you. And that's enough. He hugged his son, feeling the weight of his words. He'd spent years hiding his own truth, and now Ethan was paying the price for their honesty. Later, James invited them to a community event at the bookstore, a reading by a local queer author. Mark hesitated, worried about exposing Ethan to more scrutiny, but Ethan insisted. I want to go, Dad. I want to feel seen. The event was small but warm, with a diverse crowd of locals listening to the author's stories of love and struggle. Ethan sat beside Liam, their shoulders brushing, and Mark saw a spark in his son's eyes he hadn't seen in weeks. James caught Mark's gaze, offering a quiet smile that made Mark's chest tighten. After the reading, Liam's mom, Sarah, approached Mark. She was a warm, no-nonsense woman who ran a local bakery. Liam told me about Ethan, she said. I'm glad they've got each other. And you're doing right by your boy. Mark's throat tightened. I'm trying. It's just hard. Sarah nodded. It is. But you're not alone. This town's got more good than bad, even if the bad's louder. Her words stayed with Mark as he drove home. But the peace shattered when they pulled into the driveway. Spray painted on their garage door, in ugly red letters, was a single word, freaks. Ethan froze, his breath hitching. Mark's rage surged, but he forced himself to stay calm for Ethan's sake. Inside. Now, he said, guiding Ethan to the house. He called Carla and the police, his voice shaking but resolute. This wasn't just a threat, Anna Marie, it was war. The police arrived within the hour, their flashlights cutting through the dusk as they photographed the graffiti. Mark stood on the porch, arms crossed, his anger a tight coil in his chest. Ethan stayed inside, curled up on the couch, his face pale. The officer, a gruff man named Rodriguez, promised to increase patrols but admitted catching the culprit would be tough without witnesses. Carla arrived next, her jaw set as she examined the scene. "This is escalation," she said. "I'm pulling footage from every camera within a mile. We'll find them." Mark nodded, clinging to her confidence. He couldn't let Ethan see him falter. Inside, Mark sat beside Ethan, who hadn't spoken since they'd seen the graffiti. "We're gonna fix this," Mark said, his voice firm. "They don't get to scare us." Ethan's eyes met his, raw and searching. "Why do they hate us so much? Dad, what did we do?" Mark's heart cracked. He pulled Ethan into a hug, holding him tight. "We didn't do anything, Ethan. Some people, they're just afraid of what they don't understand. But we're not backing down." The next day, Mark rallied. He called Sarah, who organized a group of parents to repaint the garage. By noon, a dozen people showed up: neighbors, Liam's mom, even the queer author from the bookstore event. James was there, too, wielding a paint roller with a grin. "Told you this town's got heart," he said. Ethan watched from the porch, his expression softening as the red letters disappeared under fresh paint. Liam joined him, their hands brushing as they shared a quiet laugh. Mark caught James's eye, and for a moment, the world felt lighter. But Carla's call that evening brought reality crashing back. She'd found footage of a car near their house the night of the graffiti car registered to Tyler's older brother, a 20-year-old with a rap sheet. "It's not proof," Carla said, "but it's close. I'm working with the police to build a case." Mark's resolve hardened. He met with MS. Harper again, demanding action against Tyler and his brother. She agreed to expel Tyler if evidence linked him to the vandalism. But Mark sensed her reluctance. The school was a battleground, and he was tired of fighting alone. That night, James came over with pizza, offering a distraction. They sat around the kitchen table, Ethan cracking jokes for the first time in days. James's presence was a comfort, his laughter easing the tension. When Ethan went to bed, James stayed, his hand lingering on Mark's. "You're stronger than you think," he said softly. Mark's heart raced. He wanted to lean in, to let himself feel something beyond fear and anger. But another text arrived, anonymous and chilling. "You're next." Mark's blood froze. He showed James, who gripped his hand. "We'll fight this," James said. "Together." The final text pushed Mark over the edge. He wasn't just protecting Ethan now, was fighting for their right to exist, to be themselves without fear. He called Carla, who worked with the police to trace the latest message. By morning, they had a break. The burner phone had pinged a tower near Tyler's brother's apartment. It wasn't enough for an arrest, but it was enough for a warrant. Mark kept Ethan home from school, unwilling to risk another incident. They spent the day painting the garage with Sarah and Liam, turning it into a mural of vibrant colors, a defiant middle finger to the hate. Ethan's laughter, tentative at first, grew stronger, and Mark saw his son reclaiming a piece of himself. That afternoon, Carla called with news. Tyler's brother, Derek, had been questioned. Under pressure, he'd confessed to the graffiti and the texts, claiming it was just a prank. Tyler was implicated, too, and both faced charges. The school expelled Tyler, and MS. Harper apologized, promising new inclusivity programs. Mark felt a weight lift, but the scars remained. He and Ethan sat on the porch that evening, the mural glowing under the streetlights. "I'm proud of you, Dad," Ethan said, his voice steady. You didn't give up. Mark's eyes stung. I'm proud of you, too, Ethan. You're braver than I'll ever be. Ethan smiled, a real smile, and leaned against Mark. We're a team, right? Always, Mark said, his voice thick. The next day, James invited them to the bookstore for a community meeting. Locals gathered, sharing stories of love and struggle, vowing to make their town safer for everyone. Ethan spoke, his voice shaking but clear, about being bi, about the hate he'd faced, and about his dad's courage. The room erupted in applause, and Mark's heart swelled. After, James pulled Mark aside. I like you, Mark, he said, his eyes warm. And I'm not going anywhere. Mark hesitated, then took James's hand, feeling the world shift in the best way. Months later, the threats were gone, and the mural stood as a beacon of hope. Ethan and Liam grew closer, their laughter a constant in the house. Mark and James took things slow, but every coffee date, every shared smile, felt like a victory. In the end, it wasn't just about coming out. It was about standing tall, together, against a world that tried to break them. And in Ethan's eyes, Mark saw the truth. Love was their strength, and it would always be enough.